I teach a class called Composition and Technology once a year. It's usually in our spring semester that I've been able to develop each of the years that I've led the class over it's been 4 years for me because I took it over after we had a professor that retired. And it falls actually in line with our choreography classes. So it's a composition class. But when I stepped into the class, it already had kind of a dance for camera component. So the students were working with dance for camera, creating their own.
Welcome. Stick around if you want to learn about the art and philosophy of beautiful movement mixed with evidence-based exercise science. We'll be having tough and inspiring conversations with other coaches, experts, artists, and athletes. Our goal is to challenge myths, explore concepts, and engage in healthy debate as we dive deep with intrigue and curiosity. I'm your host, Hannah Deutscher. I've been teaching dance, Pilates, and yoga for over 2 decades. And what I've learned is that movement can be the joy that integrates us all together. When we can trust and express ourselves through our bodies, we are unlimited in our ability to change ourselves and our communities for the better. We, as movement teachers and coaches, have the power to help people experience this for themselves. Okay, everyone, let's dive in. Exchanging ideas and changing people's lives one session at a time. This is the Pilates Exchange. Kelsey is a versatile dance artist whose work bridges tradition and innovation in the most captivating ways. With a diverse 20-year international career as a performer with renowned companies throughout the world, such as the Moscow State Classical Ballet Company, Thodos Dance, River North, Chicago Dance Company, just to name a few. Kelsey is someone who aims to embody the spirit of creativity and boundary pushing in the world of dance. Kelsey integrates dance with emerging technologies, creating immersive experiences that blend choreography with film and animation, AI, motion capture, and interactive media. Her boundary-pushing interdisciplinary collaborations have been presented globally, and her digital work has been screened in festivals across the US and Europe. She's an assistant professor of innovation in dance at Western Michigan University. Kelsey is shaping the next generation of artists using her classroom as a creative laboratory. Her dedication to her craft has been recognized through numerous awards and residencies, including the WMU Presidential Innovation Professorship Award in 2023, the Choreographic Coding Lab in Germany, Tanz mit dem Tiger, that's a digital dance maker, and the NCC Akron Dancing Lab, Art Speaks 2.0 residency. With an MFA from the University of New Mexico, a BFA from Point Park University, and certification as counter technique teacher, Kelsey's breadth of experience across performance, choreography, and scholarship informs her versatile, multifaceted career. Her curiosity and bold vision reveal dance as a perpetually evolving art form, which she continues to shape and create with her innovative and captivating work. She is a forever dance nerd and collaborator, and she just finds immense joy in making art, spending time with her husband and daughter, and traveling around the world. We're really lucky to have this conversation with Kelsey. Let's dive in.
All right. So to all our listeners, I'm so excited to invite Kelsey as part of the Pilates Exchange for today's very interesting conversation about, well, it's going to go all over the place. It's going to be about bodies and technology and the digital world and about teaching. I think we'll probably go that route also. And where do those sort of not only intersect, but sometimes collide? I think that's going to be a fun conversation. So, Kelsey, do you mind? I mean, our audience has already heard a little bit about you because I read them your bio, but in your own words, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. My name is Kelsey Paschich by way of Albuquerque. I'm currently residing in Portage, Michigan. I'm in my 5th year of full-time academia, which also is new landscape for me. I'm at Western Michigan University, and I'm working in the dance department, but working very much integrated with lots of collaborations with other colleagues and peers and artists from different mediums. So that's kind of my passion and way of working at the moment. I'm a mother, I'm a wife, and I most recently have fallen in love with gardening and mowing the yard because until I moved to Michigan, I didn't really do any of those things. So enjoying the landscapes of like the world around me. So
Beautiful. I love how I was kind of expecting you to say, "Oh, I love being on the computer and learning new technologies," but that's not what you said.
I love that too, but yeah,
But
I do it a lot. Those are like the other pieces of me that maybe you wouldn't know.
yeah. Well, I think it's such an interesting intersection to know that you have this rich background in technology and body. And sometimes I think so body, I mean, like you are a dancer, you're a choreographer, you teach movement, all sorts of different modalities of movement. And sometimes I feel like technology, and maybe we'll have to define technology in a second, but like they're in two separate different worlds. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's interesting what you're doing right now is you are just taking them together and saying, no, they actually belong together in this way, the way that you're saying it. So yeah, just wanted to put that out there. What is technology to you?
Yeah, I mean, quite honestly, I see the body as a technology. And so as movers and dancers and doers and shakers and Pilates and yoga and any sort of movement realm, like we're already navigating these amazing systems and these amazing layers that we live in and with. And so the integration of kind of external technologies, in which I think a lot of times when it lands in these types of conversations around like dance and tech or things like that, we think of computer, we think of software, we think of machines, we think all of these kind of non-biological things that are definitely technology. But for me, like it's always inherently body first. And I feel like even when I'm working with these external technologies or softwares or things like that, and I actually, as I was taking some notes and writing some thoughts for today's podcast down, I recalled that I was in Austin in March this year doing a creative research trip. And I went to the Apple store and I scheduled they do like the 30-minute demos with their new Apple Vision Pro, like these, crazy, like augmented reality, VR headsets. And so I did that kind of 30-minute demo, and it's profound and crazy, and the tech is insane, and your worlds are merging because you can still see the real world around you, but what's going, images and text and things that are going on inside of the glasses. But what I could not take my mind off the whole time was how uncomfortable the physical headset was on my face the entire 30 minutes. And I was so upset that I was feeling so frustrated with my sensation and my body experience that I couldn't fully get immersed inside of this technology that was being presented in front of me that was like, merging my worlds. But I think that's a thing. Like, I think that
Yeah.
that's a thing, like with these emerging technologies, the tech companies, and not to say that there are not embodied people creating emerging tech, but it just seems like there is a gap between all the considerations of what the machines can do and what that means for the human, either wearing it or using it. Or a lot of these new emerging techs also have kind of like gestural components to it, right? So like when I had the Apple Vision Pro glasses on, they teach you these hand gestures that you pinch and you drag, and that's how you're moving stuff around inside of the world, which is very cool, so you kind of do a setup. And I'm like, okay, cool, gestures. I have that. I was like, I even got complimented on how good I was at the gestures. I was like, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. I'm a dancer. I'm good at this. I've been practicing for years. But something that actually kind of freaked me out was that it does like eye tracking. So your eye kind of acts as the mouse, right? Because you're not touching anything, right? You don't have any handheld devices. It's just kind of like glasses on the head. And so it knows where you're looking, and it looks and it'll highlight the app or the photo or the whatever. And then you can pinch, you could drag, you could zoom, you can do whatever. But that to me felt so invasive. The eye tracking.
Really? Yeah.
I was like, that feels like new integration. That feels really personal. I mean, anatomically, our eyes are literally a piece of our brain hanging outside of our head, right? So like it just felt very personal to me. It felt like it crossed like a new line of excitement and fear of like what all of it could be and all of it can do. And I mean, I think I choose to be cautiously optimistic about all of this technology because I think at the end of the day, it's humans creating it, it's humans using it. And like any new technology, it can be used for good and used for evil. So it's a crapshoot, and those
Yeah.
fears are real. But I don't know, I kind of trailed off there, but I think, I don't know, that was just it was a really interesting experience talking about body. But
I think that's really interesting that the eyes were the one that got you. Like that, I haven't tried them out yet. That's something that's on my list
it's
of
really
things to do.
fun.
Hopefully.
You should do
Oh,
it.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's really interesting. But somehow the eyes do feel like that's sacred for me. Right.
Mhm.
Like even if you look at it from like a yoga perspective, that drishti, that focus is super controlled, and I don't want people sometimes to know what I'm looking at. I mean, even when I'm dancing, actually, is that
Yeah.
I would, you're keeping track of where people are through your eyes, and your head may be in one way, but you know what's happening over on the side because of that peripheral vision and stuff. So I feel like that's also been a way for us to, as dancers, like sort of have a different type of ownership,
Yeah.
where our eyes are. Does
Right.
that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. And it makes me think about how, like, yeah, the eyes serve so many purposes, right? It's a sense, right? Our sight is a sense, but I think as dancers, it is a way that we connect and we see, and that is they have energy and they create direction, and they, inside of movement, it is, if you're not using your eyes, there's not a lot of clarity, right? But it does feel very personal of like what I'm seeing. I don't know if I want everybody to see what I'm seeing. And really, in context of like the headsets, they could only see what I was seeing because they were looking on, this person was guiding me through a demo. They had, like an iPad or something where they could see what I was seeing so they could direct me. But
Sure.
I didn't like that they could see what I was seeing. But maybe if it's a personal experience and you have your own headset, nobody else can see what you're seeing. So maybe it's not, but I felt very vulnerable in the
Mhm.
space with the friend that I had gone with and the person that I had just met, watching me have this experience and being able to, go, oh, no, no, look a little to your left. Now look up. Now look,
Yeah.
directing
But
me.
but it's so like, and again, prefaces like I haven't tried it out. I'm just like,
Yeah.
spinning off of it. Like what sort of amazing medical services this could create, like
Yeah.
how people are viewing things in the world from their, like being
Right.
able to see what they see. That's incredible. And
Right.
then from like a movement perspective, like say we're, I don't know, like say we're working on a balance, like
Mm-hmm.
I mean, then if you were to think in a couple of years or whatever, and you're working on that balance, we know as dancers, like where our eyes are also going
Yeah.
to be like
That's right.
where we're going, right? So if it's in a pirouette, now where are your eyes tracking? How much is that going to maybe help where our spot is? And then maybe we'll be able to rotate even more. And then we have explore even that part of it too, like as like a correctional tool.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it just, I think, yeah, as dancers and as movers, I think we use our eyes so maybe more intentionally, like we would
Yeah.
use, an arm or a leg, or think we use our eyes in that way. Yeah. So I don't know. That was an experience.
Oh, that's really fascinating. It is, yeah. And it's just super interesting. And it's just like one tiny little facet of where technology can take us,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I do think I was trying to think through too. Okay, well, you have some of these new companies with emerging tech and there's gestures, there's movement involved. And then now we have some eye tracking that's starting to get thrown in the mix. And then you have just your basic like games, of like whatever old like Dance Revolution, where it's like you're getting up and you're moving your body, or you're playing tennis in your living room, or so I'm like, there's that side of it too, where it's like there's tech that it's like actually encouraging movement of the body. And maybe many people that wouldn't be using their body are. But I feel like as movers, no matter what tech comes out for me, that will never take away my desire to be embodied in my biological vessel that I'm here in. Like I will always have that craving and need to move my body, to dance, to connect with space, to connect with people.
Yes, absolutely. And I think though we're sort of in a bridge of I'm not a digital native, right? So
Mm-hmm.
or maybe some of the age group that you're teaching right now would be digital natives, right? So do you see a difference in how they feel or experience what that word embodied is?
That's a really great question. This isn't particularly about dance, but my daughter is 14, and the way that her generation is navigating socialization is very different than our generations. And I think this is because of technology. This is because of the smartphone, and so like a portion of their social interaction happens through, Snapchat, Instagram, whatever, online platform, TikTok, whatever they're doing. We've had to continue to encourage this in-person interaction and hangout, because I feel like there's just much less of the, oh, my friend's coming over after school, we're going to hang out, we're going to eat a snack, we're going to watch TV, we're going to, even when they're hanging out together, they're on their phones, and I remember one time she had a friend over and they were in a room just hanging out and they were both sitting on the bed next to each other, both on their phones. And I went in and I went, do you know there is a real human right next to you? You could actually just talk to each other. And it was like really a not welcome comment that I made. It was like an annoying mom, like get out of here.
Oh, mom.
But I mean, trying to like honor that balance, because I think that it's like, this is part of their landscape. This is part of their world and they've never known otherwise. Our generation was analog and then the digital came in, we experienced that like leap into some digital stuff. So, but I feel like the embodiment piece is very interesting. I don't know if I have an answer to that, because the generation that's in college right now, like undergrad, a lot of that is obviously all of our classes are in person, rigorous, doing all of the things that we did in training as dancers at that age. But they're very well apt at the creating TikToks, the creating their online presence, their branding, things like that. And that's a lot of being really comfortable in front of a camera or a phone and just putting yourself out there all the time, which I think is a really interesting piece of this generation's culture. Because I don't know. I mean, I think if I were to have sent myself back in time and we had all of these tools, like it actually might have crushed my self-confidence. I don't know. Because you can see so much, it's like you see all of these amazing dancers on Instagram. You see all of these celebrities, you see like those kind of filtered lives. And I'm grateful actually that it missed me, because I don't know. I think it might have taken me out of myself a little bit.
I totally know what you mean. Like, I feel like I might have felt the same way. I mean, so Christian and I are quite often on Instagram, and all the places and all the places.
Yeah.
So, I feel comfortable on there, but I don't know if I would have younger.
Yeah.
I feel like now at this point, I'm so much more comfortable in my own skin than I was, say, at your daughter's age or doing all that. So it's interesting. Yeah, it's informative, and it's super interesting, because then, how much of them being in front of the screen would be performing from the screen for a screen, like we perform for an audience, or is it, I feel comfortable and I feel embodied and this is what I'm showing. And I guess that's probably a very personal thing for each experience, each moment might be changing. I do notice that even like when in our teaching, where we have new people that come into the studio and it's like, okay, well, I'm going to make a quick TikTok now, or now it's time for like, I'm doing a little Insta, and like, and having to navigate that as a teacher. Like, I never thought I would get to that place, like having to also have really clear boundaries about when that is allowed to happen in our movement space, when we're focusing on getting you more embodied. So that's
Yeah, because again, it takes you right out of the physical space that you're in. It's like this focus, this presence that's toggling. It's like you're trying to shift your attention all these places and then you're kind of nowhere. You're everywhere and you're nowhere. And I remember when, we had that good solid year inside of the pandemic when we were instructing over Zoom. I had some of my students, I mean, a lot of them, obviously it was super difficult for everyone. We were so lucky to be able to continue doing what we do inside of our bodies and have the health and all of that through the pandemic, because it was awful. But I noticed that the majority of the students, like they did okay with it and they were just kind of making it through. But then I had like a handful of students that, and it's not that they weren't thriving in the in-person space, but they were just there doing their thing. They'd come and they'd go, and that was it. And there was a handful of them that were thriving taking Zoom classes. And I was curious about that. And I kind of inquired with some of the students, and some of the feedback was that they felt so much better not having eyes of their classmates on them while they were dancing. So they felt safe inside of whatever space they were practicing in, whether it was living room or something, that they could really just kind of really be present with themselves. And I was really surprised by that. And I appreciated them sharing that, because I just assumed that everybody was dying to get back into the in-person space. And some of them actually were thriving inside of being separated out and just having space for themselves and able to take class, but not everybody felt like everybody was watching or their peers were judging, so they could work stuff out in their bodies.
This is an interesting conversation that I also had with a handful of our clients that we were, of course, going through the same thing over here. And at the beginning, it was just our clients from our studio. As time went on and restrictions started to loosen up and people started to come back in, there was a group of people that said, no, I don't want to come in. This is the best thing that has happened for my physical practice, for my mental, the space. And it was the same conversation that we were having, like, tell me more about this. And it was having a safe space at home where they can explore, they can stop, they can stay longer in a movement. If they say, fuck it, I'm out, like they go out and do something else if it's too much, and they don't feel any sort of societal pressure to continue to do whatever it is. I have to say, I believe that we create safe places within my studio. I really do lean into that, but it still was not enough. And that's not a bad thing. I think this platform gives even more than what I could possibly offer in the studio space. Because what we're doing is we're giving them complete control of the environment that they need to be embodied.
That's right. That's right. And I think it was a reminder to me too of how much our environments affect us, whether we're aware of it or not, and how much sensory input there is in a dance class. It's people, it's high energy, it's music, it's navigating space, it's navigating how you're feeling, where your mind is, where, there's actually a lot going on to navigate, and it requires such fierce presence. And sometimes the environment can pull you maybe in too many directions. And so I really respect those students and those clients just going, actually, this is just a better learning environment. And it's not that you're not creating a safe learning environment for them, but it is so individual to each person, and depending on where they are in their journey of their practice, whatever the practice is. Because often I think even I have to remind myself that even if I'm in a room that's a specific level and we've placed them there and whatever, each of these people have such a specific different journey in dance and where they are with it and what they want to do with it, that it's like those offerings in the room that day might just not be for everybody, right? And that live adapting we do as teachers, in the moment of like, what's the plan? And then it's like you get in the room and it's like, well, now what's the plan? And then you start moving and you go, okay, now what's the plan? It's like these real-time decisions of, adapting, and I think trying to meet the room where they are.
Yeah, that's exactly what. There's no difference in teaching a Pilates class or teaching, a yoga practice, or it is always that adapting, reading what's happening in the room, feeling what's happening in the room, and then adjusting as the coach or as the teacher, like, okay, well, how, given this knowledge that I have in this moment, how can I best serve these people, and still recognizing that each one is on their own journey. You said it so beautifully.
And it's a constant reminder too, because it doesn't allow me to be stagnant as a teacher, even if I have a format that has worked inside of a semester and I have the exact same class the next semester. It is not the exact same class the next semester. It just cannot be. It cannot.
Yeah.
When I started teaching, I felt underprepared and overwhelmed. I needed to learn how to plan my training so that it made sense, but I wasn't sure what was working and what wasn't. So many teacher training programs leave out the actual art and business of teaching. This is why we created Train the Trainers. Train the Trainers is designed to give you the tools you need to create a powerful learning environment for your students. Gain access to the vault of our collected knowledge where you can learn everything we have to teach you, whether you are a freelance teacher or a studio owner. Get constructive feedback on your teaching with actionable tools you can apply immediately. We can't wait to be part of your teaching journey and to help you grow in your business. Welcome to Train the Trainers.
What kind of technology, if any, are you integrating in your teaching?
So I teach a class called Composition and Technology once a year. It's usually in our spring semester that I've been able to develop each of the years that I've led the class over it's been 4 years for me because I took it over after we had a professor that retired. And it falls actually in line with our choreography classes. So it's a composition class, but when I stepped into the class, it already had kind of a dance for camera component. So the students were working with dance for camera, creating their own. But I have built in a motion capture project inside of that class with my collaborator, Kevin Abbott. He is the director of our Vital Arts Lab here, which is a virtual imaging technology and arts lab here at Western Michigan University. And that just opened this last year, but we had motion capture cameras inside of one of our dance studios for a couple years. Actually, during the pandemic, it got moved over. So this is also kind of this serendipitous way that I kind of found my way into motion capture and playing with that a little bit. And so inside of that unit that I do with the students, that is actually ever evolving and changes each semester. This last semester, we had the project inside of the Vital Arts Lab for the very first time, which is cool. We've got this beautiful LED wall, this kind of curved wall. So there's this huge screen in the space. And all of the motion capture cameras got moved into the space. And so we were able to do some really cool capturing with the students. They, put on suits and got to use some of their choreography and think about that translation of how am I choreographing for camera versus stage and capture versus live and all of that. And then do some live interactive experiments with what was happening on the screen with their avatar and what they were doing in the space, and set up some really cool sensors on caps where Kevin and some of his interns inside of the space had set up some cool parameters for us to play with. And so we had 2 dancers that controlled the sound. So if they were close, it got louder. If they were far, it got quieter, or we could reverse that. And then same thing with the speed of the avatar. So then there was a dancer that controlled the speed. If they were here in space, close to the wall or far from the wall, it would go faster or slower. And so we were kind of creating this live composition. It was actually a bit chaotic. We had a lot of dancers in space and we're like, okay, next time we start with just one. We layer it in because it's a lot of input, but that has been super fruitful, I think, for the students inside of thinking about choreography and composition, and also kind of getting them out of choreography is only about the movement I make. And so getting them to think bigger around all of the other components that affect whatever they're creating. And so that's been really fun because that's developed over the years that I've been here. And I would love eventually to have a full semester of just that actual project. So I'm trying to build to that, but I've really put it inside of that, all the tech work that I'm doing and that I'm researching, I've put inside of that course because it's a lot of, I think working with dance and tech, it's a lot of collaboration and there's a lot of moving parts. So there's a lot to organize, a lot to consider, a lot to plan for. And so it feels like a manageable and very focused, intentional way to also grab students that are interested in working in that way. They know what that class is. They know what they're going to get. If that is of interest to them, they pop in there in the order that they need, because you don't need to take our choreography classes in any sort of order. That's kind of where it's landing right now. Otherwise, if we're talking about the body as a technology, I teach all of our genres, ballet, modern jazz, and there's definitely a lot of integration in how I used kind of experiential anatomy, talking about space, effort, energy, things like that go just across the board. And that is not so different than the languages that are kind of going into some of these like new software programs, how some of these coders are coding in the language that they're using if they're kind of working with dance. I noticed last September, I attended a choreographic coding lab in Cologne, Germany, and it was really this beautiful intersection of people that have any sort of interest in dance and tech or movement and tech. And so it was creative coders and digital artists and choreographers and filmmakers and dancers and just kind of all together for 5 days, and just really there to kind of ideate and talk about different creations. And it was really just so fulfilling. But I got to work with a creative coder who was creating a program with a dancer using motion capture data to do so. So it was simplifying this very, very, very much because it's an incredibly complex program that made my mind explode. But it was basically, the program is choreographing. It's learning movement that you input through data, through motion capture data, and then it starts to assume what it thinks might be next anyway. So very interesting, really exciting. But what really caught my attention too, as I was sitting there and trying to learn it, was the language that he is using inside of this is really like Laban Bartinieff. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was so incredible that, I think it's such an important learning. There's so many incredible, I'm not certified in that, but I've taken classes. I have some colleagues that teach that stuff, but it was not lost on me of kind of the dance history importance of that. I think it is making a complete, I don't want to say a comeback because it's always been important, but it's finding new life inside of this digital world is maybe what I'm catching on to, because it's I think the parameters, the structures inside of what I know of Laban Bartinieff and the language, it's so straightforward. And I think it's so easy to understand, like this effort, this energy, the flow, bound, right? Like all of these descriptors that humans and machines alike, I think, can connect. So that really caught me.
That's really interesting. And I think about this conversation is specifically about choreography and dance and stuff. But when I'm thinking about teaching Pilates, when I'm teaching, I am choreographing. That's the way that my brain looks at the movement. I'm structuring an experience, a choreographic experience in that space. And I have this program that I teach called Train the Trainers. And part of that is actually based on Laban. So that Laban Bartinieff, we are taking these descriptors of movement so that our teachers that aren't familiar with dance can understand that this is a brilliant way of understanding and seeing movement and creating movement experiences for people. Because once that's broken down, it's like pieces of a puzzle. It all just comes together. So it does make sense to me that this would be a great way to, I don't know of a better way for technology to be integrated with body. I couldn't even imagine a better way, actually.
Yeah, no, I absolutely. I mean, when I saw it, I'm like, of course, this makes total sense. And I know what it's saying. The machine knows what it's saying. Absolutely. Yeah.
Really. So maybe this is then maybe this question has already been answered, but how can we ensure that the human element doesn't get lost in this?
Yeah, I love this question because it really connects to liveness for me, that humanness, that liveness that I think as a dancer and a human that just loves movement, I find really falls flat when it gets sucked into the screen and we're in a two-dimensional space. I feel like that's a piece that gets lost. And so a lot of my inquiry when I'm researching new modes of choreography and performance is like, how do we keep that? And is it only if there's a true live component of in-person in space, or can it still happen only? And is there a way to capture it and take it into the digital space? I have no answer, only lots of questions around that, because I think that is the piece that we absolutely should not lose or give up or forfeit, because I think that is what makes us inherently unique. Not just the art form of dance or movement, but I think existence on this earth. I think all of life is so fleeting, so ephemeral. I think we capture that in dance. That's what we celebrate at every moment that we're doing it. If we're performing or we're rehearsing, or, it's like you never go into the space the same. Everything is always changing. And so something I like about motion capture that feels like the common ground for me right now, because it's not a new technology by any means, right? But I think we're using it in different and new ways. But what I like about motion capture is that it requires the human body to gather data, right? Like our dancing is data. So we are inputting our data into the machine so then it can do something with it. But that is inherently human, even when you kind of see the avatar on the other side and it's missing all of this nuance and, emotion. It just doesn't capture, right? That is a big interest of mine too, because I think that also leads into this conversation on like a digital identity and like what that is and like who we are. And Kelsey is a human here and Kelsey is a human in Zoom talking to Hannah. Like even that is a kind of a separated self a little bit. And so, yeah, I mean, I have no answer for that, but it is on my mind all the time as I'm messing around with this tech. And I notice, it's like the Apple Vision Pro. Like I get really mad when it's like, I don't think they considered this. Like, this is hurting my face. What is the point? Like, what is the point of making this incredible technology, that I could sit in there for hours and hours and hours and it's integrated with my real world experience, but I don't want to because it's hurting my face or it's like it on my actual body, it's not working, like so I don't know. I don't know. And I mean, just artistically too, with works that I create, I oscillate between live and fully digital and somewhere in between because I'm just never satisfied. I'll do one and I'll get bored and be frustrated. And then I'll go to the other and be bored, missing things for me. And I'll go back and kind of work in this middle ground, which seems to be kind of where I am right now. This kind of hybrid live interactive is really the space that I'm loving. And I think it's because of this question you're asking. The humanness, the liveness is still so present. And it feels like a bridge. It feels like there's a space between the space. There's the physical world, there's the digital world, and then there's that space in between that I think has to be created. And I think humans do that.
That's beautiful. Yeah, beautifully explained and beautifully questioned. And I think that's the point of all of this, right? It's always about going deeper with our questions, and like where can we go from here? What do we discover next? And yeah, so I think that is, like I said, beautifully questioned.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. And I think also that's the point, going in to figure something out and leaving with more questions. I think that's where we should all be living. I think our world has lost its way with curiosity and inquiry at this moment for many things. So, I think artists are always doing that work though. So I love that. I'm super proud to be an artist because I think that's the world we live in and our practice demands us to keep that open mind, and never fully be quite satisfied and dig back in. Our approach to dance or to teaching or to moving is like, it is all one approach, like how you do one thing is how you do another thing. And this, like, I feel like a piece that is missing for me inside of the tech and I can't figure out, I'm really like feeling not sure how to manage it, is like, it's just missing this kind of like spiritual piece for me of like, it shouldn't be a dead zone. Like, and maybe this is the liveness. I think this is all a thread. And I think I'm speaking of like my own work that I'm just like, God, how can we get that in there? How can it like live and breathe a little bit, even though it's captured in time and you can, for just the digital stuff, you can just rewatch it anytime or do whatever. Like there's major convenience and accessibility pros to that. But then it's like, yeah, but it's missing this thing for me.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Like I feel like it's on the cusp of something, right? Like, and I do think it's like I think that the accessibility aspect of it needs to be explored a whole lot more. Like, I think that's really exciting as far as like what it could do for people, say like mom. There's a lot over in that area, but then how can we use this to make humanity better?
That's right.
So the spiritual aspect of it, and I know you and I both believe in the same thing here. Is that we're not talking about a religious aspect. We're talking about like what is the deep down humanness, because I think that's the spiritual aspect of it. What can we do there to get us all back into like, well, here's a weird way. Okay. So as we're going back into this like philosophy that I thought we had finished, but we're not. So like when we think about like the digital way that we are all connected, right?
Yeah.
Like Facebook, like we have all these connections all over the place, but it's like a digital like a blueprint of what's happening. And like, I think that when we're talking like on the deep spiritual, where the religions want us to get to is like this, like a heart network between all the people. Instead, that's the blueprint that we should be going for. But instead, we've reached it faster through a digital world rather than that like you and me we're. Do you know what I'm saying? I don't know if I have the language for this.
No, I think what I'm hearing too, yes, you're totally right. There are a couple of things that are coming up for me is that technology is evolving faster than biology. So like we're not in sync, right? It's just not. And then like this spiritual, like the thing that I'm taking too from a lot of religions that I feel like they're saying in all of their scripture or their beliefs is it's beyond the physical world. Right. And so it's like, it's not like the thing, whatever we're talking about, like transcends the physical world. Right. And I think it's so hard to grasp because it's maybe not something you see. It's something you feel. And it's something, right, like the heart, like it's a shared energy through maybe dimensions, I don't know, planes, I mean, I think it's just bigger.
It'd be great if we could feel that connectedness all the time in our bodies rather than feeling like the digital is the substitution for it.
And that is something that I was actually kind of journaling about today when I was trying to get my thoughts arranged for this podcast. I was like, I don't think I fear the lack of like embodiment or that I'm going to not move my body or like, I think there are two fears that I have. And one is that we will no longer be truly connecting with each other, what you and I are talking about right now. Having long form conversations, like asking questions, thinking about ideas, like instead just kind of doom scrolling or whatever, that just becomes more of our reality. And then the other thing that like scares me a lot is that the moment when we get to this place where, and the tech is already kind of there if you want to jump into it, like the Vision Pro, is the merging of realities. So you don't know, like you lose grasp on the line between realities or like what that is. Like that feels scary to me.
Should people be able to choose their own reality too? Like in that, like.
I know, because then it just comes into like, what is your reality? And is that like, does that become an equity question? Right? Because it's like, we're born where we're born into the situations we're born into geographically where we are, so it's like, should people as a human right eventually in the future have the ability and the freedom to be able to choose their own reality? And that's their human right. Yeah.
Crazy.
So crazy.
Well, we'll just have to have a conversation more about this. Like,
I know. We keep talking about it all day.
Totally geek out about it. Oh my gosh. I cannot think of a better way to end this conversation unless you have some parting words for our listeners.
I mean, I think I'll just reiterate that I feel as an embodied mover, a dancer, but just a human who loves to move in all ways. Like, I think this is all about our mindset and how we approach using the technology with intentions and with care. And I think as movers, dancers, artists, we already have such a heightened awareness inside of that. And so I think I'm such an advocate for artists and movers because I think that our sensitivities are our superpower. And I'm cautiously, but moving forward with optimism with the technology that can kind of come out. And I think that we should jump on board with it so that we can have a voice in the room of what's being created. Because I think movers and dancers need to be included in these conversations with this tech that's being created, how it's embodied and what it means in practice.
Thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, thank you, Hannah. It was a pleasure to be here. I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. A great cost-free way of supporting us and the podcast would be to give us a 5-star rating. You could also look down into the show notes and grab any one of the free resources for teachers. I hope to see you next week on the Pilates Exchange. Happy teaching, everyone.